Okay, this October 2nd, 2019 meeting of the Oyster River Cooperative School Board will come to order. Beginning the evening, we have the architect's report. We have Ron and Andre here to talk about, I think, primarily finance of where we stand in terms of the cost estimates for the new middle school. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Sorry, wrong side.
This is the new site?
I gotta do the Alt-K thing again.
Wow, it's very scenic view. Very scenic.
So we've made some changes.
Flooding and what?
On the bay. Yeah, that's nice.
It's futuristic.
It's a view from Al's house. Totally, yeah, exactly.
Well, that was the sixth graders were doing that last week, right?
Sorry about that. So actually, we haven't made many changes. We're still continuing to update the front of the building. So this is what the state of the current design is. And this is the front entranceway. So as students come into the building, you know, there's a little bit of cover over them. And then this is the co-drive rendering that we had shown last time. So we're here to talk about budget, and Andre is here to answer any questions as well. So just to cut to the chase, the bottom number in red that you're looking at is currently the budget stands at $49,249,207. We are continuing the process of going through all of the line items with Andre in terms of where's the money getting spent, everything from concrete to furniture and equipment. And so how that breaks down currently is the building is a little bit larger than what we had been talking about. It's 143,459 square feet. Currently the site work is $5,546,865, and obviously that includes everything that we've talked about to date in terms of the parking and the drives and the turf field and such. The new school construction estimate is everything that you've seen to date, and that stands at $36,005,096. The construction contingency in the DD budget, DD stands for design development because we're in the design development stage, which means we're continuing to develop the design. So we've carried a pretty hefty contingency of $1,750,000. And then in addition to that, there's the CM fees of $971,383.
That's construction management fee, right?
Construction management fee, sorry, yes. Yep, that's Andre's fees for the 3 years or 4 years. From basically when he was hired to the building is completely done. So the construction budget as it stands right now is $44,273,344. And that's all of the things that we just talked about. The soft costs, which are everything from the A&E fees, the permitting that goes on, the furniture, the equipment, the IT, the AV, the specialty consultants, food service, things like that, that adds up to $4,975,832, which brings us to that total project budget of $49,249,207. The last slide that we have is we have been looking at add alternates and deduct alternates. Just to start quickly with the deduct alternate down below, we've done some flow tests on the water lines in the streets around the building site, and we are incredibly close to not needing a fire pump, which means we're incredibly close to needing a fire pump. So right now, within that number that we just talked about, total project budget, we have included a fire pump. And the thinking there is that once we start construction and we get the new lines in, which will change the volume of the water, if we don't need the fire pump, we'll be able to deduct it out of the project, and that'll go back into your contingency.
What the heck is a fire pump?
So a fire pump is, there's a certain amount of pressure in the lines, and there's a certain amount of volume of water. There's two kinds of pressure. The first, when you open up the hydrant, it comes out really fast, and then it kind of ends up with your residual constant pressure, if you will, and there's also a volume of water. How we measure that is we have a tall building, so the most remote sprinkler head from where the water comes in the building, so the highest and furthest away, that has to have a certain pressure, whether it's 250 PSI or 65 PSI, I'm not quite sure. But at that most remote head, that tells you whether or not you have to boost the water pressure and volume in the building, or whether it's okay. So we're right there when we do all the calculations. So we've included the fire pump, and we also have a generator on the site for all the emergency systems and such, so the fire pump would be connected to the generator as well. And then the add alternates, we've shown you in some of the renderings some exterior solar shades, but we also have interior shades. We'd rather have the exterior ones so that the teachers don't pull the shades when there's glare, things like that. In other words, control it without having to waste time putting shades up and down. So we have that, the upgrade to a generator. So there's been a long discussion. Typically generators are done for all of your emergency systems, emergency lighting, card access, security system, enough heat, freeze protection to keep the building from freezing. That's the generator we have right now, which is 300 kW. And so to upgrade that so that the entire building can operate during a power outage as if there's nothing wrong is $131,445, and that increases the generator size to 800 kilowatt. So it goes from 3 to 8 with that number. Currently,
Excuse me, can you tell me what the number for the 3 is again, please?
it's $150,000.
And so the 131 would be additional?
It's $125,000.
And the 131 would be additional?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep. So right now, in the total project budget, we have $125,000 for a 300 kilowatt generator.
Got it.
To increase that, it's the $131,445. Right now, we have approximately 900 seats in the auditorium. We've been talking about 900 or more seats, so to put in additional seating to get to 1,000, for instance, would be $133,730. We've shown you sort of, as you come in the front door, we have the lockdown vestibule and then the lockdown lobby. So essentially, you have 4 rows of lockable doors as you sequence through the building. So for the time being, we're identifying that one of those sets of doors, which is that third door in the vestibule, is $33,534. And that is for the framing itself, the glass, the doors, and also the card readers, which work on those doors. So that's sort of all in that access control.
Ron, excuse me, can I just ask a question? On the generator, the upgrade, is that a replacement? Is that an actual upgrade to the existing generator?
No, they'd both be new. So right now, the $125,000 is for a new 300 kilowatt generator.
So this would be in addition to that? To
Yeah, we would actually
boost the
not do the 300 kW generator. We would just get an 800 kilowatt generator.
Okay. And the current generator, which is, am I remembering correctly, that's relatively new?
No, it was
That
moved
goes
in
to the-
from the high school. The
Oh,
one
I
at the
see.
high school is new. So over the course of the last 6 years, Dan, we've put in generators at all the buildings that make them completely operational. It's not just a safety generator. If something goes on off at Mastway in terms of power, generator takes over, the whole building is operational. So in this scenario, we would be in an emergency setting, but if we want the whole building to be operational, as we do at the high school and the 2 elementaries and the current middle school, it would add $133,700.
So the
1
generator,
to 31, 445.
the generator currently at the middle school is our oldest generator, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
So then, what we had in the original budget was a number specifically for, and this is part of the soft costs, furniture and equipment, IT, and AV. We have been getting estimates, just as we're estimating the building. We're going back and talking to furniture vendors, IT and AV vendors, and they believe that, depending on today's pricing and without having a crystal ball, that essentially $210,000 may or may not be needed. And so what we wanted to do is show that as an ad alternate. So, and that would be something that we would place aside, if you will, because that takes place almost at the end of the project. The whole building will be basically constructed when we move in the furniture and the IT and the AV, so we'll know better then what those prices are. So we wanted to have that as an ad alternate as well, and that $210,000, in case, I'm sure you've all heard about the tariffs in China, and that's really affecting the furniture industry. Even though a lot of that stuff is assembled in the US, a lot of the components come from overseas. And the same thing with AT and AV, that technology is constantly changing. And it's pretty far out to budget that, yep.
So does the building as it is now, does it include those solar panels over, like, we talked about having the buses, like, have like a, covering and solar panels on that? Is that included at this time?
So that's a power purchase agreement with someone like Revision Energy.
Okay.
And the school district has been working with them, and we've been working with them. And so our design accommodates all of that.
Okay,
So what they would do is enter in an agreement with the school, and they would actually build the structures to hold up the solar panels over the buses, and they would include the ballasted systems that go on the roof
okay.
that we've talked about.
So that's like a totally separate,
It's a totally separate
Okay.
budget that it would be an agreement that most schools enter into, and I think you've done this before
Yeah,
with
we
Revision
have.
Energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
So that's pretty much where we are. We just wanted to give an update. I know that Andre is coming to the board in November with the full GMP, but we wanted to just sort of let you know where we're at currently, that we're continuing to develop the design and develop the budget numbers as we're designing Andre's estimating with his team.
So we'll have the guaranteed maximum price to you on November 20th.
I'm sorry, I was like, I knew I had another question. Can you I don't understand the solar shading, like, so internal shades are just your typical shades that you pull down. So what's the external solar shades? What's that?
So if you're looking at the diagram, you see the high windows to the classrooms? They look like they have a little visor
Yep.
out in front of those windows. If that were to be installed, so obviously you have these things on the outside of your building, right? So there's an added cost to that, which is a lot more than just a shade, you can imagine. But what that does is it allows you not to have to pull the shade in order to block the glare. So when the sunlight is coming down, it hits the solar shade and bounces that light up into the room. And the glare from the sun that would normally come in. So you have this on the south side and the east side of the building.
Okay.
We don't have any on the northwestern or the northeastern side of the building.
We
So it
put them
doesn't-
in the Massway project, Denise, in the front when you're walking towards the entry to the Massway project there on the office windows because of the very issue of lighting.
So it doesn't block the sunlight from coming in,
No.
it just diverts it so it's not glare?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, got
Yep.
it.
And you can do this a couple of different ways. So one is to have the shades outside, the shading outside the building. Another one is called a solar shelf or a sun shelf that's actually inside the building. So as the sun, as the angle of the sun comes in, it bounces off that and cuts down some of the glare. The nice thing about the outside is it cuts down more of the glare than the internal light shelf does.
Yeah. It's not a question, just in terms of an observation. I guess I'm looking at, in terms of costs, if there's an area that we need to kind of save a little bit on. I guess I'm feeling that a 900-seat auditorium is probably adequate, is just kind of my opinion. I know that still discussion, but in terms of, you know, if we need to look at places where we might need to cut back a little bit because something else comes up higher, to me, that would be
Yeah.
something that could be, I feel like 900 would be adequate, I guess.
Thank you for that, Denise. So, you know, what Ron is doing tonight in the short time he's presenting was a 2.5-hour line-by-line analysis with Tom and Brian and the committee going through and trying to keep the number as true to 49 million as, you know, we've been saying. So this is a work in progress, and we'll continue to refine and refine, because when we get out to November 20th and Andre is standing in front of you and he says the guaranteed maximum price is X, he's locked and loaded at that point, and so he wants to make sure he's comfortable with the number that we get. So we're at the stage where we're constantly refining these numbers now.
Yeah, so I guess for those of us who aren't on the committee, you know, just a kind of an observation in terms of, you know, I mean, that's just I guess my opinion is that might be a good place to kind of look at some savings.
Okay.
Ron, this, one of the things that kind of pleasantly surprised us when we talked on Monday was that we could actually earn interest when we put the bond into,
Right.
because we're not going to spend it all at once, and so that's accounted for, that interest is accounted for in this number, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we have a very conservative interest number. So you're not a tax-paying entity. So almost every project we work on, you're going to sell the bonds, they give you a big chunk of money, right? So you put that money in an interest-bearing account, and that's the account that you use to pay for the construction as it goes. Well, over time, you're going to build up some interest. And in order to stay out of trouble with the IRS, as somebody who's making interest as a non-tax-paying entity, they usually put in the ballot that it's the bond plus the interest that'll be spent to build and equip the building. And so that's, you know, that's why we wanted to make sure when we're going through this, you know, we don't want to get to the end of the job and have a few $100,000 left over because it hasn't been expended. So we're actually, you know, making sure that that's part of this. Yep.
I happened to be at a law conference today and asked bond counsel that very question, Denise, and, you know, and I texted Sue the minute I heard, because Sue is working with bond counsel. When it's timely, we'll present a warrant to the board that will be developed by bond attorneys, and we want to make sure that the language is such that it provides maximum flexibility to the school board to expend the funds. And so it was an interesting conversation, and I instantly was texting Sue through the whole meeting saying, who is it, what are we doing? So it has to be incorporated into the warrant.
Questions? Thank you. See, things are right on track. It looks
Thank you
like.
very much again.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Andre, don't speak so much next time.
I can go over, if you have time, the process that's going to happen in the next 6 months.
I think the board would be interested in that, Andre.
Okay.
I was teasing you, but I didn't realize that you were going to speak. Sorry.
Well, we're a tag team. Good evening, everybody. So just to kind of help you understand the process as it's been going forward over the last half of the year, we have been working with the architects and the building committee to develop plans. And every time a plan is put together, we try to develop a quick budget for it and kind of keep things on track. Right now, this budget is based on maybe 18 pages of blueprints. And I don't know, ultimately, there probably will be 300 for the project. So in this, on Friday or Monday, we will be getting upwards of 100 plus blueprints. That will be sufficient to be able to send out to various subcontractors and say, okay, take a good hard look at this, update the budget that we have, and with those numbers, we'll be able to come back to you and say, here is our guaranteed maximum price. And there will still be a hefty contingency in that, because the next process will be to have the voters approve it. And if that happens, then we will go out to bid for every part of the project. So at that time, we will get committed numbers, write subcontracts, and begin construction. So when that happens, we'll have the full set of plans to be able to do that. So this is kind of the process that we're following. And so far, I think it's gone really well. We've gotten great feedback from the building committee, and the architects have been great to work with. So we're looking forward to hopefully moving forward in March. Any questions?
I had a question like, okay, November, we get the fixed number. And this, what if you went out and then you say, okay, and you say this is what it's going to cost for, say, furniture? What if you go out then and later on and you can't get that you know, the amount, the price goes up? How does that, but you've already had a
Well, that's
fixed.
why we have that contingency fund.
Okay.
The 1.75 million that's built into the budget is to anticipate if something goes awry when you actually go out to bid.
Yeah, and there is absolutely no doubt that that's going to happen in something or other, because
Yeah.
we cannot, in November, make a commitment to anyone, so they in turn can't go out and buy the materials and lock them in. So we have to develop the budget based on, you know, anticipating that, because I can never come back to a client and say, we need more money. So we have to make sure that we're all protected.
Andre, can
in
you
that
speak to
process.
us, to the board, because you talked to the budget committee about why you'd be so confident when you hit November and you haven't put it all out to bid yet? What process do you go through to internally validate you're in the right place?
So up to this point, what we've been doing is, as we get plans and information is developed, we have done material takeoffs. And based on our experience with other projects, we know that this particular carpet will go down for this much a square foot. Steel will be erected for so many dollars a square foot, things like that. Mechanical systems, we've analyzed all these different mechanical systems until settling with the committee and the architects and engineers on the one that we think will be best for the school. So each time that that's been done, we've had, let's say, a mechanical contractor who has looked at this. It's not been competitively bid yet, but he's been, you know, he has a great experience. He's done 3 geothermal systems just like the one we've chosen. So he's able to provide quite good numbers. But we'll still bid this, and hopefully, you know, come bid time, we'll get better numbers. In some cases, there may be a giant price increase on steel or something, but hopefully the general bidding will come in lower. So when that process happens, we'll have given you and signed a guaranteed maximum price contract. But once we get all the bid numbers, we will take them, put them into the same spreadsheet that we had presented on Monday to the building committee, and be able to say, all right, here are the actual bids, and the building committee will have a part in choosing all of the subcontractors and suppliers. We'll provide lists. You know, decisions will be based on, you know, that they're able to do the project, their competitiveness on the bid, and maybe relationships that the school already has with some of them. So as a team, we will select the best people qualified to do the project. And then all of the money that's left, if we're fortunate enough to come in under budget, that money will go into the contingency. And that contingency, you know, we're looking at some of the alternates. We will try to start picking up those alternates with money that is left over. So at all times, we have to stay under the GMP. But hopefully, we'll be able to accomplish some of these additional alternates as we move forward.
Denise?
I just thought of another question in terms of going back to the solar panels. So separate, we have to work out something with revision. But But what happens if it's too expensive, we can't do it? I mean, the building isn't designed to have, like, we're designed in such a way that we're sort of counting on having solar as,
Right.
so how would that work if it turns out that it's too expensive for?
Well, it would become part of the capital budget, and, you prioritize with Jim, Sue, and I in terms of what issues are more important than others, just like we do every single year. But most important thing to remember is, as Ron's designing the building, for example, on the generator, he's designed it to take the 800 kilowatt generator. He's designed it to hold the solar panels on the roof. He's designed it as if those things are going to be accomplished. The more rigorous two-story structure outside the art room and the STEM room, so it could be added on to in the future. So he's designing it with the idea that those things will ultimately happen. Even if they don't happen in the construct of the building project, they'll be able to occur based on decisions the board makes as we build capital budgets in the future. So it's going to be future ready. If we can't do it in 1 year, we'll be able to do it in future years.
Would we have enough energy, if we say we couldn't do the solar panels right away, is there enough alternative energy sources to be able to power the building, I guess is my question?
Yes. So
Okay.
the solar panels is a supplement to hot water and what other features, Ron? Hot water and?
Yeah, so the geothermal system is going in. That's all part of the project. Solar hot water is also part of the project. We have condensing boilers so that for freeze protection and so that we don't have to spend a lot of energy with heat pumps for the hot water systems, because that takes an incredible amount of energy. We are also working with, not only are we working with Revision Energy, but and Jim has been leading the charge with Sue, with Unitil and Eversource. And so, they are also right now working with a company called DMI Inc., Demand Management Institute Inc., out of I think they're in Waltham, Massachusetts. And they're putting together energy models to, again, assist what we're doing to drive down the energy use of the building.
Right. And the envelope itself, Denise, is being done in such a way that it will be also ready for any supplemental energy sources, solar, et cetera. So the places where we're putting our money are in that superstructure of that building to make sure it's always ready, even if we're not financially, we would be in the future.
I think we should take a close look at rolling the solar in with the project, even if it increases the total amount that we have to bond. Given the types of interest rates we're looking at, and given the way that a power purchase agreement is structured, I think we would probably find that we would actually, it would save more than the bond payment would be on that incremental cost to go ahead and do it upfront, even if the district had to own it directly.
All right. Well, you could certainly look at that and put that in front of you for consideration, Michael. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It isn't.
Okay, moving ahead, then we need to move into our typical meeting. We need the approval of the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Denise?
Make a motion to approve the agenda?
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Brian? All those in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor, the agenda is approved. Public comment? No? Okay, we have 2 sets of regular minutes to approve. Could I have a motion to approve the September 4th, 2019 minutes? I'm sorry. Those are the ones where Kenny had the additions to. Yeah.
I motion to approve the September 4th minutes.
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Second by Brian. Ready to vote on those? All those in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. Those minutes are approved. Could I have a motion to approve the September 18th regular meeting minutes? Denise?
I motion to approve the September 18th minutes.
Moved by Denise, second by Brian. Are there changes to those? Denise?
Yeah, I have three things. The first is on page 4, where it talks about hiring the nurse, and it says historically low employment, and it should say historically low unemployment. And then on page 6, under my comment, when I say, wait a second. It says something like when I, that's not the right page, that's why I can't find it. Let's see. I know that the change I wanted to see was to add the words, and we don't know what additional costs we will have in years to come. It was maybe that's not the right page. It was talking about the debt, let's see.
Probably the second paragraph.
Oh, yeah, it's at the top of page 6. Yeah, Denise Day recognized that option 2 is more of a gamble because we will be paying the same for 20 years. I'd like to add the words, and we don't know what additional costs we will have in years to come. And then the last one is when we are talking about 3.5, there's no mention of Michael suggesting that we go with 3%, and I feel like that was an important part of the discussion. Oh, I'm sorry. It's in that same section.
Right.
Yep. I just think it should be added just because that was, especially when it says that the motion was withdrawn or something, I believe. So I just think that we should add a line that, Michael Williams, however you want to word it, Michael.
I don't care if it's there or not. I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to these.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a motion. I don't think it needs to be there.
Well, we did, because then we withdrew. Wait a minute. I gotta find it, I'm sorry. I had it and then I lost it.
While you're looking for that, also on that same page in the motion about the bonding options, the first line says that I moved to adopt level 2 bonding option. And I think what we mean there is it was level payments, comma, option 2. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so I found it. It's the right at the end of page 6, when it says that Al motioned and I second. And then in beginning of page 7, it says that we decided to table the motion. So I just think there should be a line in there that Michael Williams would like to see 3% increase or less or something. Because that was part of the discussion.
What would you like to say with this?
If Michael's okay with that, Michael Williams would like to see 3% or less. Is that accurate? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I know it was a big part of the discussion.
Suggested 3%.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And then just, which I think I already gave you, Laura, the Bevy Cattell. Yeah, will identify you, not just as a generic resident of Madbury, so. Okay. So with those changes, can I just some?
Yeah, I had 2 changes. On page 5, when we were talking about the nurse position, and we did have a discussion too about trying to look at the nursing situation kind of in a proactive and a comprehensive way, and that's not captured. So so there's the line where I said want to see a job description. And then I wrote that I voiced my support for hiring an additional nurse given the current situation, but felt that moving forward, we should assess our current nursing model and act proactively to best staff this need. I can give you that if that's okay with other people.
Okay.
Because I think that was kind of like Denise's point. It was a discussion we had. And then on page 7, when we're talking about the proposal, Tom brought up about the gum thing, and my abstaining kind of looks strange and without any context. So what I had spoken, and I recommended adding some element of emotion to the proposed warrant going to the New Hampshire School Board Association. He felt that this would make our stance more compelling and would increase the possibility of its acceptance.
Can you say that again, Ken? Because I tried to back Laura up, so that's why I want to make sure we both have it.
Have that written down.
Yeah, so Kenny wrote and recommended adding some element of emotion to the proposed warrant going to the NHSBA. He felt that this would make our stance more compelling and would increase the possibility of its acceptance.
Can I hand that to?
Okay. So with those changes, could I have a motion to approve? I don't think we have a motion,
No,
right?
we already have a motion,
We already have a motion? Okay.
Just need
just
to,
to vote.
Okay, so I think the sense is, could we go ahead and vote with those changes? Right, so ready to vote? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor, the minutes are approved. Announcements, accommodations, and comments from the district?
Good evening. David Goldsmith, principal of Moheramet Elementary School. I'm just coming tonight to tell you about an event that has already happened and an event that is about to happen. We kicked off our Year of the Ocean theme this school year with our first all-school monthly assembly this past month. We are really focusing on student connection to their curiosities and their questions. We began with a parade into the gym with all the students. Each class had created a flag with a symbol of something related to the ocean that they worked on together that really captured their ideas about what it means to be living on the seacoast and thinking about the ocean. And when we got into the assembly, each class presented a question that the students from kindergarten through 4th grade had brainstormed. Many classes had brainstormed upwards of 15 to 20 questions that they all submitted to me and that we'll be organizing throughout the school, but they presented one to the rest of their classmates and schoolmates. And we're categorizing all these questions, and we're going to be using them throughout the school year as we connect to our other assemblies and our other work so that students can really be owning this learning and these enriching ideas. Some examples of some of those questions were, what does pollution do to the ocean? And why do oceans have salt in them when rivers don't? And then, of course, there were all of the questions about very specific animals and why some animals glow in the dark and others don't, and things like that. So it was really a very wide spectrum of really engaging questions and just supporting curiosity and wonder from our students. And then, of course, in October, we invite all of you to come to Moheramet on October 16th to carve pumpkins with us, and then come to our stroll on Thursday, October 17th, starting at 5:30, where we celebrate the culmination of all of our planting and harvesting of pumpkins and carving at our annual pumpkin stroll. Any questions? Thanks.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. Misty Lowe from Massway. We too had a full school assembly I wanted to share with you a little bit about. Some of you may have heard of The Dot. This is a very popular book, and it is celebrated internationally. It was very special for me as an interim principal to experience Massway's tradition of Dot Day. All the students came in wearing dots, staff came in wearing dots. There were fun activities. We all went out on the playground and made a huge human dot. Pam Felber led us in a fantastic song, and a lot of this was led through our art teacher, Deb Hastings. So, are you familiar with the dot story? No. So Peter Reynolds is an author. He has several books that talk about school culture, climate, things of that nature. This particular book, I just have a few things here. The Dot is a story of a caring teacher who dares a doubting student to trust in their own abilities. This takes place in an art class, and the student didn't feel that they were a good artist, and the art teacher just encouraged them to simply start with a dot. So the student created the dot, and this small dot on a piece of paper becomes a breakthrough in confidence, courage, and ignites a journey of self-discovery and sharing. And this has become an international story that is celebrated. And Massway has a tradition of celebrating Dot Day every year. So I had a lot of fun. If you are able, we do have open house tomorrow night. It is from 6 to 7, and you will see going down the hall 375 dots that have been created by each of the children in art class. And I really want to publicly recognize our Unified Arts teachers. They're just remarkable. They're so passionate about what they do, and it really shines through not only in the classroom, but really throughout the entire school. It's really quite remarkable. There's more I would love to share with you guys that I'm not sure the best vehicle. I know my airtime is brief and that you have a lot of things to cover. So I don't know if emailing you to share some pictures or something like that, if that would be acceptable. But there's so much I would love to share with you about what's happening at Massway, and I just wasn't sure the best way to go about that. But I think you would really feel the energy that I'm experiencing day to day in the building if you were able to see some photos that show you the excitement happening at Massway.
We like photos.
Good. I'd love to do that. Questions for me?
No?
Thank you.
Are there announcements, comments, and accommodations from the district? From the board? All right.
Just wanted to thank Dr. Morse for setting up the meeting with Barrington last night. That was excellent. I'm glad we do that at least once a year, and if you haven't already, Jim, if you could thank the superintendent and the board chair for having us.
I'd be glad to.
And feeding us sugar, which was great.
Yeah, cookies are good. Other comments? Just kind of an announcement that I think, Sue, I think we're thinking October 19th for actually signing the Orchard Drive property over to the town. Is that right? 17th, yeah. So that is actually going to happen. So we have all the language, and so that'll be done. Other announcements? Assistant Superintendent's report.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. We're entering October, which in the teacher professional development world is sort of the beginning of my push to encourage people to begin to look at sabbatical options. So I'll be publicizing that to staff over the coming weeks and months. To remind you, last year Chris Hall was on sabbatical, and he did an action research project, which he's going to be reporting to you on here in just a couple of minutes to kind of tell you what some of the amazing things that were accomplished. This year, we have Leslie Ayers. She's a world language teacher. In fact, she and I and a team from the K-5 World Language Committee visited Glastonbury, Connecticut on Friday. Had a great day. Glastonbury, for those who don't know, is like a state-of-the-art. They're a program that's been in existence for 60 years in terms of world language, and they graduate, 15% of their kids graduate bilingual by the Apple assessment, which is a very high-level assessment of proficiency. So anyway, Leslie is actively engaged in her sabbatical, and she's doing a lot to support the effort of the World Language Committee, which, by the way, we will be reporting to you at your November 20th meeting on our recommendations and findings. In addition to Leslie this year, we also have Kara Sullivan, an English teacher here at the high school. She is on sabbatical second semester, and so she's doing some great work around helping students to use the outdoors as a way to reduce stress and anxiety, and to build that into classroom activities that promote writing and literacy. So she's doing some really great stuff. So just a couple of words before I introduce Chris. Chris, his sabbatical was on an action research project, and I know many of you had a chance to come and see some of the great things that he engaged staff in doing. Chris is continuing that work. I think for this year, he was just telling me he's got 23 people who are actively engaged in a process again this year. I really think this is the kind of professional development that is really transformative to the way teachers learn and think and interact. I was at an amazing conference today with a group of math teachers, some of which were engaged in the action research. It's just amazing when you start thinking that way. It's much more data-oriented, it's reflective, and it's teacher-specific to them improving their practice. So Chris Hall is here tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to him to share with you the great stuff that he did last year and kind of give you a preview of what he's going to do this year. So Chris, you want to come on down?
Hi, everyone. Chris Hall, middle school, and thanks for giving me a chance to come in and talk a bit about the sabbatical from last year and the project that I took on, which, as Todd said, is an action research group. I think you all heard about it last year, but I'll hope give you some insights and a little bit of a refresher. So just to refresh your memory, action research is really teacher research. It focuses on student learning, and it focuses on a problem of practice. So each teacher it's basically a natural extension of what we do as teachers every day. You know, we make observations in our classroom. We see what's working, what isn't working, what our students need. We see a lesson that's flopped, and we think, well, what am I going to do next? The difference is that action research has more of a structure. It's more of a systematic approach. And it also involves sticking with one thing for an extended period, in our case, the year. So that deep dive into that question has a lot of power because it allows you to see the same issue from multiple angles, and you can stay with it and gather data. That's something we don't always do on a daily basis. So although it's something teachers do, it's an extension of that. So who we are. This was our group last year, and this is a list of those folks. I think I presented them to you last year, but I think you'll see there, it's a really dynamic mix. It was, every school was represented, a wide range of grade levels from grade 1 to high school, and a really diverse group of disciplines and subjects. This year, we have a great deal of diversity as well, and over half of our group members from last year came back, so these are our returnees. Over half decided to continue their research or to try a new question, start anew, and then we had quite a few new members as well. So we have actually our group is larger, which is okay. It's a good problem to have, but we have 23, and that's probably about maximum. The really cool thing is that we have the wisdom of the returnees, and we've got this great energy this year of the new folks, so it's almost like having a multi-age class. It's pretty fun. I feel like I'm teaching one of those for the first time, and it's a terrific group. So to refresh your memory about the steps of action research, if you start at about 10 o'clock, we start with a problem of practice, like I mentioned. It might be something we've observed about our teaching that surprises us or maybe nags at us. It could be a tension we're noticing or those students that keep you up at night. But we start with a problem, and then you develop that into a question. Like any research, you create a question, and the question really drives the whole process. From the question, we create a plan. Your action plan is a roadmap for your year or your research, however long that's going to take. And it involves lots of pieces like data. So you start gathering data to see, how am I doing? Is my hypothesis correct? Is it working? And the data can be something that is quantitative. Certainly some of our group used standardized test data. But it also, I would say, much of it was really creative use of data, things like student surveys and interviews, videos of kids, obviously lots of student work. We take time to analyze that data and look for patterns, and again, to see what's working and what isn't working. And then lastly, sharing results, which I'll talk a bit more about. I know some of you got to see those results last year. It looks like a cycle, and it looks very nice and neat, but really the process is much more recursive and iterative. It's not a neat circle. You develop a question, you maybe gather some data, the data you analyze and realize that data didn't say what I was hoping it would say. Maybe I don't go back to the drawing board, but I go back and gather some different data, or maybe I change my question. So the arrows are a bit different, but that's what real learning is all about. It's not a neat process. These are our research questions from last year, 18 of us. Wide range of questions, and I'm just going to focus on a few to highlight some of the lessons about our research that our group came up with. One of the biggest takeaways our group had was the connection between us, no matter how diverse we were. For example, Andrea Lawrence was looking at how she could use inquiry-based learning in 7th grade science to engage kids. A lot of the push in science now is phenomenon-based, where kids use their questions to drive their learning. And she looked at that versus, sort of teacher direct instruction, what she called a brain dump, and looked at how those two things, how this inquiry-based learning might help kids learn better. And compare that to Jacqueline Jensen at the high school, who was looking at project-based assessments in her high school social studies class as a way to foster a sense of civic engagement, to get high school students to think they can make a change in their democracy. Both teachers were doing very different things, but in similar ways, focused on student agency, student-centered learning, project-based learning. So there were a lot of connections that teachers found naturally. The other thing about our group is that we were very, very diverse in our questions and our pursuits. For example, Aaron Ward took on a pretty traditional, used traditional data for a research project on, at the ALEX program, which is a web-based math program. He wanted to see if using this adaptive math program online would help kids with their math skills on pretty traditional tests. And he did a phenomenal job, but compare that with Sarah Larson Denon, who was trying to see if she could foster greater compassion in her students. How do you create empathy for yourself and for your classmates, an environment? So that's a pretty wide range. And I would say both those connections and the variety of questions was what energized our group throughout the year. Sharing our results. I'd like to just talk with you briefly about how we shared what we learned. We shared through research shares, which some of you came to, and this is one of the a takeaway form from that. Probably one of the greatest ways we shared our information was just at monthly meetings. So informal shares of where we're at in the process, our questions, our insights, and our frustrations. We shared through blog articles, so I encouraged each teacher, and many took me up on this, wrote blog articles about their process and what they were learning throughout. Barb Jasinski here wrote a piece called Questioning Our Question, which was about the way our journey in action research and in any learning can really take a meandering route, and that's part of it. And then she sort of celebrated that. We created a website for folks to share results and information about action research with folks outside of our group. So this website was a way to share about action research in general, and then about our specific work with our questions and blog articles. And as many of you know, and thank you for attending these, many of you came to our research shares. They were held at 3 different sites. On 3 different schools, and each teacher presented their research. They were very dynamic. I was really impressed, and I know many of you were as well. Lastly, we'll be sharing our action research at the National Council of Teachers of English. They have a national conference in Baltimore in November, and we wrote a proposal, and we were accepted for that. So 8 of us will be headed to Baltimore to present about action research and what we learned. So this last section is my reflections and insights about my sabbatical and what I learned about this process in general. I asked each of the members of my cohort last year to fill out an anonymous survey and gave them 3 statements to kind of get a quantitative look at how the group went, and then I gave them some open-ended responses. So the first statement I asked was, action research has helped me grow as an educator. When folks surveyed, they strongly agreed with that. 4.9 was the average score. Folks felt like this was something that helped them become a better teacher. The second statement I asked was, was, I found action research to be a meaningful professional development experience. And that was unanimous. Everyone strongly agreed that it was meaningful for them. And lastly, I wrote the statement, I would recommend action research to my colleagues, and again, that was unanimous. Folks strongly agreed with that statement. And that showed with a lot of our returnees coming back, and folks were pretty energized to try it anew. When I surveyed people, those were great responses, and I felt obviously good about them, but what I learned most was from the open responses folks gave, and I'm going to share a few of those. They all really focused on the benefits of action research. I asked them, what worked with our group, what what helped you and what could we do better. And one of the biggest things folks said was that the structure and focusing on a question, having a structure was what helped them. Most folks said, like this person, that, we can identify nagging questions and things we aren't doing well, but action research really allows us to do something about it. Everyone talked about how we built a community of colleagues and the value of that. And as this person said, the ORCSD think tank we created was really impressive. They mentioned, as I said to you, the diversity of the people we had in the group, but no matter how, we came from different grades and subject areas, but that folks really had a passion for doing what's best for kids. And to have those different heads together every month was really powerful. It was re-energizing. Many folks mentioned how it was invigorating. It forced us to take some risks, to be an intentional learner. That we were modeling for our students the very thing we asked them to do, which is to take a learning stance. Like this person said, I was able to create, attempt, revise, evaluate, and make new decisions just like I ask of my students. Another word for that learning stance is growth mindset. So action research makes us go out of our comfort zone. We pick questions that that nag at us. But knowing that we have a structure and that we have the support of the group, as this person said, is what made it possible. So this year and beyond, Todd mentioned a little about this year, that the group is continuing. It's a little larger than last year, and I'm still facilitating the group. So one change, aside from the mix of people, in the surveys when I asked what we could improve, most folks said more time. And so we meet monthly, but monthly meetings for an hour after school really wasn't enough to dig in. We had a few longer sections last year, and we're going to try to find some other longer time together. And lastly, leaders. So I hope that we can maybe foster a new facilitator in our group. I'm game to keep going, but I think it doesn't need to hinge on me, and I can see there'd be several people that could probably take over as facilitators in the group. And I see no reason why I wouldn't continue. It really hinges on teacher passion, and there's no shortage of that in this group and in this district. So I've been really impressed with the quality of the teachers. I was impressed before, but much more so even now that I have a chance to work with this terrific group for 2 years. So, any questions?
Chris, I have one in relation to the sabbatical. Obviously you're not on sabbatical now, you're back teaching full-time. So, carrying this into this current school year is because of your passion and your commitment to it. So, tell us how the sabbatical provided you the framework, because if you could do it this year, why couldn't you have done it last year?
Sure.
So that time that you had on sabbatical, what did that provide you?
Well, the reason I can do it this year and stay sane is because I had all that time to create the structures that, the monthly meetings, the framework wasn't there, so we didn't have a framework, and there's nothing, you can't Google how to create a group. It takes energy and time. And so the reason I do it this year as well is, I have, why someone else could take it over in the future is because I've been pretty fastidious about keeping records of our monthly meetings and what we would cover, how you would go about creating a question, what readings would you, so I had to hunt down readings. It was like leading a course. And I would say that the commitment for folks, a lot of folks actually wanted to continue, and the reason many folks didn't, I think, was the time it takes. It's a big commitment. It's like taking a college course or two a year, and so it was like I was teaching, like anyone that's ever taught a course for the first time, it takes a while to design that course, and that's what last year was. And now I'm looking at my notes and ready to pass them off if someone wants to take the reins. So,
thank you.
I just want to reiterate how interesting the presentations were, and I was just really impressed. So, and that's amazing that so many of the faculty are continuing and all the new, so that is wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Fantastic.
It's an amazing job, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
While Chris is unpacking, I just wanted to say that we also have had a number of other areas of professional development where I think the demand from our teachers to have a more personalized opportunity to really dive into issues at the classroom level, it's showing up in other areas as well. We have Bethany Silva from New Hampshire Listens doing a critical inquiry group around issues of diversity and inclusion. There's a bunch of teachers that are engaged in that. There were a bunch that were engaged in it last year as well. There was a group that worked on next-gen science this summer, and they're also kind of creating the same concept of this laboratory, trying to create opportunities for learning. And then we had a workshop this summer where a bunch of teachers worked together around competency development. And one of the things that we talked about was how to kind of reinvent how we use teacher professional development time to create a more personalized opportunity so that it's not a bring in a facilitator to do a workshop. It's the teachers who have the expertise, just try to create structures to give them the time to do it and to really make a difference. And this kind of work is just amazing, and it's inspiring to have someone like Chris work in our district.
And just to echo that, Todd, when you first came forward with that proposal to the sabbatical committee, it was so incredibly exciting because it was your growth, and certainly you would bring to our school district your growth, but it was a catalyst to really look at other models to move people forward. Taken with that comment, how you see problems, you see things that nag at you, but you became that source to move beyond that. And maybe even to Jim's question, this year you have people who know the process. So it's not like you're starting at zero. So your returnees are also now have that knowledge, and I'm sure they're mentoring the new people who have joined. And it's I think a wonderful thing you've done, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent's report?
Thank you, Tom. Just a few things. I sent you a spreadsheet of the budget compromise when it occurred, and one of the things that Brian was asking me before is, do we know what the actual impact is? We won't know specifically how it impacts our district until the state releases their analysis, which will be around the 1st of November. So the numbers look really great. The compromise was wonderful, and I thank the governor and legislature. Part of that compromise for the districts that had lost stabilization since 2012 was $68 million to restore stabilization to the 2012 level. And so you'll see, in that list, school systems like Farmington and Rochester and school systems that depended on stabilization to move their districts forward are being restored in the millions level, and that's a good thing, because these school systems are high poverty areas that were depending on that money to run their school systems, and as in the last 4 years, the legislature kept on pulling it back, and so we should, be pleased with the compromise that existed. But for those particular school systems, that compromise is only going to last this biennium. So we're not one of the systems that were big on the stabilization, because our district is wealthy compared to the Farmingtons and other areas of the state. But I want to just do a shout out to the legislature and the governor for coming to a compromise that was, for the first time, very, very meaningful to our poorest school systems. And there'll be more to come on that. So as we learn more, of course, we'll share more with you. Todd and I did 4 presentations on the middle school. I did the Medbury and Lee select boards. Sue also is in attendance. Both the select boards in Medbury and Lee had great questions, and looking forward to the guaranteed maximum price. Scott Bugby from Lee asked if he got all 6 cards, does he get a prize? So there is a good sense of I think, support in the district so far. I think when people get to hear the presentation and we talk about the age of the current building and its conditions, it really is compelling. So I was glad to be able to go to the select boards. I'll be doing the Durham Council in early December, and then I'll be going back to Medbury and Lee in the November-December timeline, because all of the elected bodies, of course, are anxious to see that it's staying in budget. And I also shared the funding process that you adopted, and you know, the people like Bruce in Madbury, who's very budget conscious, really thought that process made a lot of sense, and he was supportive of how the board has agreed to move forward on the bonding over a 5-year period. And then finally, I did 2 presentations at the middle school, to the 5th and 6th grade open house and the 7th and 8th grade open house. Denise, she comes to everything. She was my critical friend in the audience, and she said, don't forget to do this the next time, don't forget to do this the next time. So it's really great to have somebody there who say, you know, make sure you emphasize this point. So thank you, Denise, for attending both of those. And then the last report I just wanted to share is, in your packet, you'll notice that you have the Dover school system minutes, and the reason you have those minutes is they are the first board who formally support our efforts for not having guns on school property. And they did it as a vote, so that's now official. Other school systems are coming on board, as I reported earlier. I took the gun resolution that you adopted and I sent it to the New Hampshire School Administrative Association, Superintendent's Association, and asked that that resolution be sent to every school system in the state, and asked the superintendents across the state if they would present it to their school boards to get a sense of where they are. So last year, when Tom presented that resolution, we lost it 45% to 55%. At Tom's request, I set up a meeting in the next 2 weeks with the executive director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association, with the express purpose of asking them not to take a position so we can have a clean conversation with the School Boards Association members across the state. So that's yet to occur. I will tell you that I have immense respect for Barrett Christina. I don't agree with him on this particular position, but he is an awesome executive director of the School Boards Association. And I talked to him today, and I told him the agenda, and he said, I am open to that conversation. So that's yet to occur. I think that's my report this evening. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Okay, thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Business Administrator?
Only thing we have tonight is Jim is going to just talk a little bit about the plowing bid.
Good evening, Board. Thank you, Dr. Morse. I'm sorry to open up my portion of this meeting with a dirty 4-letter word, but as we start to go into the winter months, snow is upon us.
Plow.
Plow, yeah, the P word. So really what I'm coming from tonight is just to, as I said in my letter, just to seek approval from you not to go out to a formal bid for plowing services for the next 3 years. Reason being, we've been extremely happy with Land Care. They're local, right down the street, where they're familiar with our properties. Both Lisa and I work with them very closely on snow days, and again, their pricing is going to stay the same, and they also have local operators, which are members of the community, and we're, again, very happy with their service.
Questions?
And the board policy does allow us to go to preferred vendor.
If there are no questions, could somebody make a motion to allow this contract to go forward? Denise?
I make a motion to accept the snow removal services contract with Land Care Associates as presented.
Moved by Denise, there's a second. Second by Brian. Are there further questions for Jim? Hearing none.
Thank you
Ready to
so
vote?
much.
All those in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. That contract is approved. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Yasmin, Student Senate?
So there are a lot of sport games this week, so I'm just going to name a few. Today was the home game for the girls JV and varsity volleyball against Somersworth, and the boys reserve away game was today at Berwick Academy, and then tomorrow there's a unified soccer home game at 4 against Dover, and there's also home games for the boys soccer team, and the boys JV and varsity home games for soccer is tomorrow. And also, yesterday was the first day FAFSA was open, so a lot of seniors went to the financial aid night last night, and I was one of them. So yeah, that's been stressful. And the counseling department has also been really helpful by helping seniors out with their college applications by holding meetings during flex times on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that's been wrapping up. So yeah.
Okay. Questions for her? No?
We've all gone through the misery of FAFSA. We share your pain.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're down to the discussion items. October 1st enrollment. Jim?
Yep. So I've given you the official enrollment report and all the variations the state expects us to report on, including with tuition students, without tuition students, with tuition students and home school students, et cetera, et cetera. The one that has a direct impact on us is resident students and tuition students. So the total number of students in the district officially as of October 1st is 2,173, and that's just slightly higher than last year. And that does not include our PEP students. When we include our PEP students, we would just be over 2,200. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions on enrollment?
Okay.
Okay. So move to the fiscal year 21 budget goal, which was tabled at the last meeting. So I checked my Robert's Rules of Order, and we need a motion to take it off the table. So I don't know, Al, would you want to move to take it off the table?
Sure, I'll make a motion to remove it from the table.
Moved by Al, second by Brian. Okay, this just brings it back into,
Sorry, what did the motion have to say?
The motion to remove, it had been tabled, so my motion was to move it from the table.
And
Or
Brian's-
to untable it, I don't know what the appropriate term is for that.
yeah.
To move it to the table, from the table. We'll get it figured out by Robert's rules on the
I think
minutes.
it's off the table.
Off the table, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I even
Okay.
wrote off the table.
Okay.
That's what I wrote.
So ready to vote on that? All those,
I would like to, so one of the questions I asked last time was about yellow sheets. And I really think that if the administration is recommending staff additions, that those should be within the budget target. So I want to propose that. And I guess I would move to amend the, right before the boldface.
we need to get it on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We need to get
I'm
it on,
sorry.
if we're going to
I'm
amend
jumping
something.
ahead. You're right, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So do you need a motion to?
We need to get it off the table so that we can talk about it. And then if we're going to amend it, do anything with it.
Yeah, we
So-
See, we haven't done the vote yet. Got it.
Okay, so if we vote to take it off the table, and then we can do whatever we want to do.
I
Okay.
apologize.
All those in favor of taking off the table, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in
Putting it on
favor.
the table, or off the, I don't know.
Well, it's open it for discussion. When you table, you put it on, okay. I checked the book.
I'm sorry.
Okay, now it's open for discussion. Okay. So do you want to say something about the motion, and then Michael, if you want to amend?
I did. I finally asked Sue to give me the sheet that she always gives us, which is the budget and tax comparison. And it's the famous multicolored sheet that we get. And I was, met with stern unhappiness about my Fund 10 that I threw out there. So when I looked back at her sheet, and I've always been like talking about, you took all of the expenditures minus the revenue, and that's what you came up with. And I think when you look at her sheet, what it really comes out to be is the amount to be apportioned to the towns. And so and again, I'm going to move away from tax rate, because how that apportionment is broken up is based upon the number of students and the value of your property, and that really is not in the control of the district itself, and that is why we see the fluctuations in the tax rate occurring. What we can control is the amount that's apportioned to the towns. And so when I look at that, like last year, at the end, the fiscal 2020 proposal, the amount proportioned to the towns was 3.51%. And so a more, I think, clear, and I really, again, since I've stood up and defended the budget multiple times, I don't like that squishy impact thing. I think we should clearly say exactly what we mean. And so to me, the goal should be that the amount proportioned to the towns for the fiscal 2021 budget is no more than 3.5% over the amount apportioned in the 1920 budget. So that clarifies exactly what we're talking about.
Okay.
Okay. So do you need a motion?
I'm just throwing that out there.
It's already, the motion's made.
The motion, but that's a change.
That's a change. I mean, again,
I'm sorry, it's a change from...
The change was from the Fund 10. So I've moved actually, again, the primary difference is when you look at the sheet, when you do the amount apportioned, that includes the Fund 10, Fund 21 for food service, the grants, all the warrant articles that go in, and then you use the revenue and credits to offset the expenditures, and it's the actual amount of dollars that we're asking from the towns.
So are you modifying, you want to modify your motion?
I can, I just wanted to clarify, well, I mean, if you want me to make a motion, I can. I didn't want to stop the discussion because I think Michael had some points.
Go ahead.
But I was just trying to clarify exactly what I thought. So if you want me to make a motion, then that leads us to discussion. So the motion would be that...
Maybe withdraw, since you already brought your motion back, to withdraw that.
I'd like to make a motion to withdraw the motion I made, which last time
I'm
was
sorry.
for Fund 10.
Okay, take that off. Okay.
Yes.
Motion second?
Can he just withdraw his motion?
Or can I just amend it?
Well, I think the cleaner thing is to withdraw it, and the second just agrees with the withdrawal, and then we can start from scratch. Because I think if you start amending what you have, then we're going to lose track.
Okay, so motion to withdraw.
Motion to withdraw.
Second is okay to withdraw?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
Now you want me to make a motion. So the motion would be that the budget goal is that the amount to be apportioned to the towns for the fiscal 2021 budget is no more than 3.5% greater than the amount apportioned in the 2019-2020 budget.
Okay.
Sure.
The goal should be the amount of the fiscal 2021 budget apportioned to the towns is no more than 3.5% over the amount apportioned in the 1920 budget.
Yes.
Is that the motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's the new motion. Is there a second for that new motion?
I will second that new motion.
Okay, now that's on the table. Or off the table, whatever. So that's
out there. So
That's out
it's
there.
open. It's open for discussion.
Okay.
My concern about that approach has to do with the state budget that just got approved. And I know we don't know what the actual number is, but the Reaching Higher NH estimated that between our three towns, we'd end up with about $1 million of additional state revenue.
Right.
The way you're structuring that would be part of the amount to apportion, right? So
yeah, so that would offset the expenditures. So to your concern, it would give you, you could in essence have more expenditure. I mean,
I'm not sure not the way you put
So
it.
come to the podium, please.
No, you're talking about before the apportionment.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that money comes off after.
that would be the tax rate.
Yeah.
That would be the tax rate.
Yeah, the tax rate would be
Right.
affected.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep
Makes
it
sense.
as simple as I possibly can.
So why don't you just hang out at the podium in case the board starts asking questions?
Sure.
I mean, the only thing I would throw out there is what you mentioned last time, which is to go down to, because again, it started getting us into the tax impact. And the tax impact is exceptionally difficult, guessing-wise, because again, it takes things that are out of the number of students, and again, the appraisal of your property is not something that we actually control. The thing that you did mention last time, which I think is an interesting discussion, we've done that actually on the town of Durham budget, is where you said go down from 3.5 to 3%. If you did that, clearly you would be cutting into the capital improvement, because I'm not sure the additional state revenue, but we're probably going to flatline or potentially flatline on the revenue that's coming from Barrington. But if you want to see what that would look like, you could do a 3 and a 3.5. Last year we did 3.25, 3.5, and 3.75. But I'm just throwing that out there. If you wanted just for an instructive purpose to look at it, that's one change you can make.
Denise?
I guess I'm not really in favor of that, because the whole point is to gradually, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, is gradually build up that capital improvement plan so that we don't have this huge impact to the voters when the bond comes online. So I feel like that would be defeating the purpose to cut that. And by saying 3.5 now, again, that's what we're trying to do, is gradually build it up so that we're not all of a sudden going to hit them with.
I got it.
So I guess for me, I'm comfortable with 3.5.
I mean, what that forces you to do is to prioritize the CIP, is what it really does. It's like you really have to take a hard look at what's on that list. Just playing the devil's advocate here.
And I would think the 3.5 is not going to, when you start adding in, for example, you have increases to administrators, we have to get that, as part of the 3.5. That it's not going to be totally easy to hit that, and particularly, and I think it would make it very, very difficult, and I think we're going to have to be really rigorous if there are these yellow sheets, because then I think it's going to take discipline to make that 3.5.
Yeah.
And I think to go down to 3, you'd either have to scrap in some ways the plan to increase the CIP budget, or you'd have to go do things like, reduction in staff, which I don't think we ever want to go down that, voluntary reduction. So I think the 3.5 is going to be a fairly tough target, but I think it's one we probably should go for. The discussion?
When do we find out about Barrington enrollment? When does that come forward?
Oh, that's in the late winter, early spring. So what we will do, Sue and I have already had this conversation, Kenny, is we will flatline the revenue from Barrington. And if it turns out we have more Barrington students than we anticipate, that just becomes part of the fund balance at the end of the school year. I think we've been very comfortable up to this point increasing the number, but based on this year, we're going to flatline that revenue, which is going along the line that Al just alluded to. We're also going to reduce the amount of money that we receive from Medicaid because of this state emergency rule that's out there. We receive we estimated in the budget about three.
We started with 350, but I brought it down to 285.
For this year.
For the tax rate setting, yeah.
Yeah.
I brought it down.
So we're anticipating a reduction in Medicaid money as well. So, it's sort of like in one hand giveth state budget, the other hand taketh away tuition and Medicaid. So that's why I just sent you out the information that Michael alluded to earlier and said, more to come, because we can't ever think that that's going to be the real impact on our budget, because there are other revenues that we have to adjust as well.
Right. I asked about the Barrington because we had 52 when kind of the class that went by when we passed the budget for this year. And I think we were expecting continued growth, and instead we wound up with 38, which is a significant revenue shortfall. How has that adversely impacted the kind of the management of our budget, that,
I have the opportunity to revise that before we set the tax rate, so I did do that, because I know the number now. And as Dr. Morse stated, that moving forward, we won't add any, we'll just stabilize that.
okay.
Yeah.
So ready to vote?
I guess, what are we voting on?
What?
There was just the base motion, right? So I would like to, I'd like to propose that we, I move to amend the motion to add, including additional staff recommended by the administration. Staff recommended by the administration. Just to the end of the, yeah.
Do you want to say why? I mean, just.
Oh, sure, yeah, sure. So there are, if you just look at our last meeting where we talked about the need for an additional floating nurse, I don't think it's appropriate to come into the budget discussion saying, hey, this is something we really, really, really need, but we're excluding it from our budget target. So if we really, really, really need it, then we need to factor it in to the budget, not have it be in addition to the budget goal that we just are talking about right now.
I don't have a strong objection to that amendment. I'm trying really hard to put together a budget without any additional staff. I also think, when I came in as superintendent, I think it's really important, my process before I became superintendent in Oyster River was to make an administrative decision on positions. And when I talked to Al and Tom at the time, because they were both they came to the board at the same time I came in as superintendent, the perspective of Al and Tom was that we don't want you to make that administrative decision. We want to see what's important to the administrators across the district, which is where we formed the yellow sheet idea. So I don't want to not show you the yellow sheets. If an administrator comes forward and says, I feel I desperately need that, and I haven't put it in the budget, I don't want the board to be blind to the fact that Misty or David or Jim, expressed a need for a position and I couldn't fit it into the budget. So I get what you're saying, but I also want you to see what the request was.
Oh, I think we should see all the requests, okay. But the ones that you're recommending in your first budget recommendation, I think should be within the budget target.
Tom, do we have a second?
No.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, so how does that differ then from what's going on now?
So what I asked last week when we were discussing this was if whatever budget target we set includes yellow sheets, and the answer from Jim was no, it does not. This would be without yellow sheets. So any additional staff position that we create through yellow sheet review would be on top of whatever budget target we set. And I think that in some cases that's appropriate, but if this is a must-have situation that the administration is saying we really have to have this, that should be part of the structural budget, not incremental to.
So can I ask you a question? So that means when we get to the budget meeting, then we just have them say, these are the things that we didn't include? Because that's kind of what we do on the town side.
We do that.
We said, yeah, we can't do this.
I do that every year. I give you the list of things I cut, and I give you the list of the positions that I requested. You have those. I think the distinction that Michael is making is if there's something that administrative team feels is absolutely paramount, then try to fit it into the 3.5. Mm-hmm. I think that's
I'm asking you to do some of the prioritization for things that you think are really important there.
And I do that. In the past, what I did was I give you the yellow sheets in the order of priority. What you're suggesting is if something is super important to us, figure out how to get it in there in the 3.5.
Right.
I think that's a reasonable place to be. And it doesn't prevent the board from looking at the yellow sheet and saying, after I've done that, well, we also think that.
This other thing, yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it makes sense too, because that's our goal is 3.5%. It's not 3.5% then plus a lot of other things, So,
right.
So there's an amendment and there's a second to the amendment. Are we ready to vote on the amendment? Ready? All in favor, raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep is in favor. So I wonder if you, Laura, you could read the motion as amended.
This is what I have. Al Holland motion that the goal should be the amount of the fiscal 2021 budget proportion to the town is no more than 3.5% over the amount proportion to the 1920 budget, second by Zoom Skay. Michael Williams moved to amend the motion to add, including additional staff recommended by administration to the previous motion, second by Van Conn. The amendment has 7-0.
Okay. Perfect. So we're ready to vote on the motion as amended? Ready? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, the student rep in favor. We have a budget goal. That's great. Moving to the facility use policy, we have a lot of information in the backup about that with the rate sheet. And my understanding is that I don't know that we've always done this, but each year we should vote to approve the rates that are going to be charged for rentals.
Right. So this came up over actually a period of maybe, I'm going to say months, Dan, but probably years is just as accurate as months. Yeah. That we've been trying to figure out the best application of this policy. And so the rental sheet is supposed to be presented during the budget presentation that we do. And I took it upon myself, and Dan called me on it and I'm not upset, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying he realized I had something done that wasn't as tied directly into the policy as in my head it was. So I want to give you a scenario. So we have this rental list, and periodically I make exceptions to the list. And I'll give you the biggest one. The biggest one is what we do for Growing Places and Live and Learn. Been going on for years. It's never been part of this list. But if we charged both of those after-school programs what this would dictate we charge them, they would be spending tens of thousands of dollars to use our facility because they use our gym and they use our a couple of classrooms and so forth. So if we literally did this, but when Sue and I started working together, one or the other, I can't remember which, was actually paying us nothing and the other one was paying us something. And so Sue came to me and said, we really should, be treating them equally. And so as a result, we charge them a nominal amount. We charge them $200 a month to use our space. Nowhere does that show up on this sheet, but it's been a historical practice of mine, so I'm owning this. Then the issue of a relatively new organization to us, Maximum Velocity, came in, and they, to me, appeared very similar to ORYA in their intent to create recreational programs for students who largely live within the district. And the history of ORYA is sort of very loosey-goosey. That's how I would express it. Long before I got here, they were essentially acting as the recreation programs for a couple of the towns anyway, if not all three. So yeah, I'm not going to try to figure out how that all works, but we felt we needed to be super consistent with both groups, since both groups pretty much have the same mission, providing recreational programs for our students. So I asked Todd to sit with both organizations, and they came to a common agreement that both groups, when they use our turf field, would pay $2,000 for the year. So the $2,000 came from a conversation around the fact that that turf field will need to be upgraded in 10 years, and $2,000 a year was about 20% of its use. So by them using our turf field and contributing $2,000 a year, we felt like that was a reasonable contribution toward the ultimate replacement of the turf field. That's where it became a problem, only because I didn't go off this list, nor did I ever report that to the board. And so I'm out of compliance with the policy, not because I was trying to be sneaky. I'm out of compliance because the history of that kind of flexibility existed, but it never existed in language. And so as a result, Dan has been working with, really with me for about 1.5 years at this point, trying to make sense of this policy and trying to make it consistent. And so I had a chance to talk to him, have had a chance to talk to Tom, and for me to be compliant with this policy, I need language in the policy that says, that when I make an exception, like I do with Growing Places and Live and Learn, I'm reporting that to the board so that you all know that I've made an exception. So there's no indication that some sweetheart deal is being made because somebody's my best friend or they're related to me or some foolishness. It's very much in the public. We would crush Live and Learn and Growing Places. They would not exist if we charged them based on these rates, even though they're for profit. And then with Growing Place, with ORYA and Maximum Velocity, what I was trying to do is create a system of equality, so neither one of those organizations would be feeling like they were being treated unfairly. So my intent was pure. My execution wasn't. And so I just wanted to make sure that I'm owning that tonight, because I want the board to know, that's my job, but also to ask for the language that allow me to continue best practice when we're dealing with agencies or services that help our kids. So.
Yeah, so just to further establish the context, I'd asked that this be placed on the agenda because, like Dr. Morse just said, we want to get ourselves into compliance, right? So the policy calls for the board to approve the schedule of fees and then review that schedule of fees as a component of the budget process, which we're entering. So number one, we want to be compliant now, and we're entering a phase where we need to be reviewing something that we haven't yet approved. So that's the urgency to understand, get these fees, get an agreement on the fees and get them approved. And I think it's because this is a conversation that's gone on intermittently over a long period of time. I think it's worth just raising some of the themes, I suppose, that came up in our discussions. I went back and read through some of my notes and watched some of the video discussion. One thing that we have been in agreement on, and not speaking for the board now, but there's no profit motive for the district in trying to establish fees that generate revenue, right? The motive is to cover any costs that the district incurs as a result of making the district facilities available to the community, right? So what I hope we can establish is a schedule of fees that are reflective of actual costs, right? They don't have to be spot on, but that we're looking at something that somehow reflects what the district is spending, whether it's on custodial care, anticipated replacement, the turf field being, I think, the best example of that. And then one of the other themes was that, like Dr. Morse was alluding to, we want the policy and practice to reflect no favoritism, no inconsistency. And so ideally, and I understand not all situations, not all relationships are equivalent or the same, but ideally we come out with something that we can demonstrate that, yes, we're accomplishing what we've set out to accomplish, right? We're not generating revenue, we're just covering costs. We are treating everyone equitably. And so that's where I think we need to look through some of these fees. And as Dr. Moore said, it might be crushing for certain organizations to pay these fees. One basic question I'll just throw out there is, we have a schedule of fees that's based on a per day, right? Well, a per day on a weekday versus a per day on a weekend day. How do we equitably establish a number that's not disproportionate to the organization that needs a gym for an hour and a half versus an organization that is going to be using a gym for an entire day, right?
There's only, I'm not disagreeing with anything, but the policy doesn't say anything about the board or doing the fees that I'm reading. It says granting of approval, the superintendent of schools or designee is authorized to approve and arrange for scheduling the use of school, the scheduling, okay. The board authorizes superintendent, where is it?
Last paragraph of page 1.
The board will, the board will approve, because I was looking at.
It definitely says
okay,
we
the board
approve the
will
fees.
approve a schedule of fees. All right, but then it says the superintendent or designee may grant waivers. So the superintendent does have the ability to grant the waivers. Okay, I see. I was reading the schedule.
But I think Dan's point that is really well stated is when I do a waiver, I want the public to know, because what's happening is people are going to Dan and saying, well, how come so-and-so is getting it for this and so-and-so is getting it for that, which may not even be true, but that's the rumor on the street. And ultimately what Dan and I want to accomplish together is that we can publicly say we've made an exception, this is why we've made the exception. And then in terms of the fee structure, it's not an arbitrary fee structure. In the past, when we've put the fee structure in front of the board, we analyze our fees against what UNH is charging, what Dover is charging, what Portsmouth is charging. And so these may be market rates, if you will, so that they're consistent. But as a school who has organizations who are servicing our kids, who are nonprofit organizations servicing our children, we've historically made exceptions. It's just that we never made them in public. And I think the important piece in terms of integrity is to say, no, we don't charge Live and Learn and Growing Places $15,000 a year. We charge them $2,400 a year. And why do we do that? Because that's a service to our parents. And if we charge them $15,000 a year, then that service would disappear, because either they'd have to try to pass that cost on to the parents, and that would be extraordinary, or they would shut down. And both of those organizations are for-profit, but they service an amazing aspect for, well, maybe one isn't.
I don't think
one
Live and
is.
Learn is a nonprofit. That's not correct.
Thank you. But my point being, even if we charge them $15,000 a year, it either passes on to the parents, or they find a new location, and or they shut down. Those are the three options.
That is in the policy, though. After school care, programs approved for school use will be charged $200 per month for usage of multi-purpose rooms. So that exception is actually in the policy,
Right.
or in the R document.
I think the bigger picture is when we make an exception, outside of those two, we want to be consistent in our notice to the public that we've made an exception. And that would be here during my superintendent's report. For example, when we talk about ORYA and maximum velocity and charging them $2,000 for the year, that would happen in the public setting, that I've made that exception. It doesn't apply to the fee schedule, but the reason we're doing it is we want a contribution towards the replacement of the field. And if we charge them what UNH charges for turf field, neither organization would be able to afford to use our fields.
I'm just going to jump in. So it's like, I totally understand all especially the smaller nonprofits. I mean, I've gone and written an article on Live and Learn and talked to them, and they really is an amazing group, and they don't have a lot of money. Actually, one that I'm kind of nervous about is the turf field, actually, and a flat rate on the turf field. Particularly when you look at the usage, So you're saying you've come to an agreement that's fair, and you're going to charge $2,000 for ORYA, and then you're going to charge $2,000 for maximum velocity. ORYA uses it 514 times, and maximum velocity uses it 267 times. And so a flat fee doesn't seem to me to be, what if a smaller group comes in, I don't know, pick a smaller soccer league that says, you know, we're a nonprofit, a girls league, and we want to come in and we want to use it 60 times. Do they pay $2,000? So I think the answer there, I think, is, I know the market, maybe the mark rate is $150 for the weekday, and what is it for nonprofit, and $300 an hour for profit. But I think that you should charge more an hourly fee. You can adjust the hourly fee, but it should reflect your usage. Right. It doesn't make sense. I mean, if I'm ORYA and I'm only getting charged $2,000, heck, I'm going to try to use it as much as humanly possible, and that may be to the exclusion of another organization that's trying to use it. So I think the usage should be based upon an hourly fee. If you're a heavy user, you pay a bigger fee, and if you're a smaller user, you pay a smaller fee. We can adjust that fee. I mean, we have the ability to adjust. We don't have to charge $150. We don't have to bankrupt the organization, but it should be a usage fee. It's just like if you use electricity, if you use water, if you use anything else, it's based on the amount that you use it. It provides an incentive that you use it carefully. So I'm not a big fan of.
One thing, though, that whatever these organizations, not all of these are using the turf field.
I'm just saying.
I know, but like you're saying,
I know.
it uses it twice as much, but it's not all turf field. So,
even so,
I mean, it's basketball, it's other stuff, it's
Well,
stuff as well. So,
and to the point of our, what I feel our goal, one of our goals has been all along, is to establish a mechanism that we can reliably say is consistent and equitable, right? And so we don't want to incentivize, I feel, we had talked about issues around blanket booking, right? So, a particular gym or another field would be booked for a period of time and might not be consistently utilized every day or period of time that it was booked. So, we talked about wanting to incentivize newer, maybe smaller startup groups to, use the resource. I would rather we establish something based on our actual costs than a market evaluation, right? So maybe we retain the schedule of fees for for-profit entities based on external market evaluation, but for the nonprofits serving our community, we look more carefully at our actual costs, our actual anticipated replacement costs, and we come up with hopefully some much lower number, so that they can continue to serve the community, but we can, say that, the fee is based on actual maintenance, right? And so therefore, I feel like it really has to be based on utilization, because you're never going to have organizations utilizing any district resource at the same rate, right? There's always going to be some difference in scale and frequency.
Yeah. Well, if I could, I just wanted to chime in if you don't mind. The $2,000 rate was definitely established looking at the turf replacement schedule, looking at the idea that we know that that's the one facility that we have that we want to maximize its use, but that does have an ongoing capital cost that we need to replace, and we knew that going in. So the 2,000 was a number that it really was separate from the amount of use, because I think the idea was, and I think you commented to me, Dan, it's kind of a regressive way to go about setting a fee, because it's actually motivating someone, as you noted, to use it more. And I think that's kind of to me, that's kind of the point, is that we want organizations that are supporting youth anytime that we as a school district are not using the facility, because right away a school district gets priority, and then nonprofit, youth-oriented community groups, we would love to see them using it all the time. I would point out that when we sat particularly ORY and MV, there are no conflicts. Both groups, we sat down, we talked it through, and actually, as it turns out, I think ORY is actually using it a lot less this fall than because they just don't have as many programs that need it. But the idea is it's over the course of the whole year, like you might need it in the springtime when it's raining and wet and you want to get your baseball program. It's that kind of thing. So it's not an hour-for-hour basis, so we were very much aware of that. But again, the idea is we as a community, we want it to be a community facility. That's been the way all of our gyms have been treated for years with community youth groups. They use them as much as they can when we're not using them for school events. And I think we wanted to treat it the same way. Beyond, though, the $2,000 fee, don't forget there are, when it's appropriate, there are light fees, there are cleaning fees, there are other fees that are included in there. So we're not losing money to charge a $2,000 fee. It's absolutely covering our costs, but the idea is we want to support nonprofit community-based groups. And I do think it's like the kids that are in ORY, the kids that are in maximum velocity, they're our kids. They're part of the district. And I just think that to me, that's where that agreement came from.
But it misses the equity component, and which is what we want to ensure. So you want to build a protect by the blanket thing, and it may work now, but you never know. But what we're really trying to do is build the equity component that we can defend. So when someone in the future says, wait a second, I really wanted to use the turf field, so it's not a money thing, it's an equity issue to me. So it's like, by building in an hourly rate like that, we're ensuring that everybody is treated equally. And it's like, that's what so I want everybody to use the fields, but I want everybody to get equal access. Right. And so when you do a blanket fee, you take, in essence, potentially take the equity component, which is kind of something that we've talked about consistently with everything that we do in the district. So I see it as a protective measure to do it that way. It's not discouraging people. Again, you can you take $2,000 and split it up by usage, and I mean, the money can be revenue neutral, but the equity component should be in there. And I think that the hourly thing builds a protective thing that ensures equity. So that's why I would push more for that.
I agree.
And I would just, as one final point, when we discussed it with MV and with ORYA, it was left that this is 1 year at a time. We look at it, we'll look at usage patterns, we'll talk about it year over year. And I think one of the things that's important to keep in mind, this turf field is a new thing, so there are groups that haven't figured out that they can use it yet. And so so there's still some of that. So I think we're kind of figuring out as we go, but based on my conversation with those two organizations that the flat fee was charged to, they both felt good about that arrangement. So they left feeling that we were treating them fairly.
I just have a question. It's not so much about the flat fee, but when I look at these fees, they seem really extraordinarily high, in terms of and maybe there is some, this is what UNH charges and this is what Dover charges. But I mean, baseball field, $125 an hour, so you $250. Somebody's going to pay $250 for one baseball game, and then you have somebody using it 500, so many times for $2,000. These numbers seem to me to be above and beyond custodial costs, replacement, and so I just don't know how we. And if our goal is to not make money, but not lose money, and set fees that kind of, if we break even, and then you're charging like $125 for a baseball, it just seems out of line to me.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say those rates, believe it or not, I think are pretty good, because when I used to own my semi-pro football team a long time ago and have to rent a football field, it was costing me no less than $500 each game, not including practice fields that I had to pay for, and then lights on top of that, and then maintenance on top of that. So,
but I mean, if you're charging $2,000 for all that time, and then you're charging $125 an hour, it just seems disproportionate to me.
I mean, it ended up costing me about $2,000 a season. That's what it would cost me. But also, keep in mind that $2,000 that we charge still doesn't cover all the expense of replacing that field down the road.
No,
it's not even close. So,
but it's also as a district, we're using it a lot of the time. So it's we're doing a significant part of the wear. So.
Denise, go ahead.
Oh, So the issue in terms of the hourly, which I hear what you're saying about equity, but we don't want to create such a nightmare for Andy and Andy's assistant in terms of hours and, you know, I mean, I see there's a value in a group that's going to be, you know, using it, and it's like kind of an ongoing basis and sort of having that type of thing. If there's a third group that wants to come in, you know, then again, because this is year by year, you can always look at it. If next fall there's another group that wants to use it in terms of, okay, so now, you know, how are we going to split it up or what have you. I just want to make sure that whatever we end up doing isn't creating this incredibly complex, you know, system for Andy and other folks that need to kind of keep track of every little, you know, hour that groups that like ORYA that may use big chunks of time or what have you is like, oh, they use the gym, that's an hour and that's, you know, $100, and now they use the field and that's, you know, I think we need to kind of balance it, and while still making it available. I hear your point, to as many groups as possible.
So to that point, I think that coming up with a good estimation of what our actual maintenance costs / anticipated replacement costs are for any given resource within the district provides that level of efficiency, that they don't need to think about, okay, you know, who's making the request to book the resource, what relationship do we have with them, what is their utilization versus another organization's utilization, and how are we prepared for an unanticipated request from a new, let's say, fledgling organization that's just getting started that serves the community that, you know, we've said we want to encourage, right? I think the simplest mechanism is what Al described, which is we need to come up with an estimation of actual costs, not based on what other organizations are doing necessarily, and that will be our number that year to year we look at, and the administration can come to us and say, you know, we anticipated it would cost us this, but it only cost us this, or it cost us more, and that's when we make the adjustment during the budget process. It's just, there's no way we can honestly say that we're being consistent when we have a flat fee. You're just never gonna, it's never gonna break down that way.
I got two responses to that, if I could. One of them is you have to go market rate. You cannot go by cost. I mean, that's basic finance 101. Because the reason what's going to happen is if we're cheaper than everyone else within 20 miles of here, everyone's going to come here and use our field and knock everyone else that could use the field off. That's the number one problem we're going to have, because I've seen that happen before. I could not only that, you'll have excess use as well. You know, we'll literally be packed every night if we're the cheapest one in town, so you don't want to do that. When you sell a product out there, you don't sell it based upon what it costs you to make. You sell about what you can get for it in the market. The second thing is, in order to have integrity to that process you're talking about, then we have to chase people and count the hours they're using the field. And I do not want to start sending people around, chasing them around saying, oh, you were over by half an hour, or you were late by half an hour. I mean, it's the only way we're going to have integrity to that process is you're going to have monitoring. And we just don't have the people to do monitoring. I'm not going to hire someone to go out and do that. I mean, it's almost like adult babysitting. We shouldn't have to be doing that. So that's just my two thoughts on that.
So, I mean, my thought on it, one, I think it's why we have policy, because I think policy allows us to have all the new situations that come forward, and we are able to say, oh, this is what we do. And there are times when maybe there'll be a change, and we'll say, you know, this policy is not working, we revisit it. But to have the guidance of a policy, and rather than each year trying to figure out, oh, this year we had 3 groups that want to use it, next year 4, I think we need to lock it in. I think that's the point of it. And to your point about counting hours, I don't think we're on a time clock. But when people are renting the facility, you know, in their good faith, you know, Maximum Velocity is going to rent 2 hours, and that's their time. If they go 2 hours and 10 minutes, or it rains and they go 1:45, that's it. We're not going to be the police, and I don't think we need to monitor it. But I think I think, Dan, your point is, really spot on, that we need that consistency, and it's fair. And I think Al used the word equity. That's what's driving this, I think, is that equity issue. Because the sports world is changing, and Maximum Velocity showed up, and more of these kind of groups are going to be coming forward, and why not be ready for it and do right?
But that, as on equity level, okay, you could have a men's adult soccer league that's just does local older men that want to play soccer.
Right.
$2,000 to them could be a huge amount of money to use for the season.
Right.
So that's not equity if I can drop $2,000, stroke of a check, nice and easy.
I'm
Look at some velocity. But I mean, somebody like you and me start a league of older guys that want to play soccer out on the turf field, and they want $2,000. That could be a lot of money. So I don't think that equity argument really holds.
Well, it does.
Because
No,
it's $2,000 for another.
The equity is the other way. I'm not saying we shouldn't have that's exactly why we shouldn't do the 2,000.
Yeah.
It's like, look at the rink in Durham. The rink in Durham, it's not run for profit. It's trying to sustain itself. It's trying to get a little bit ahead so it can do the improvements. The people come around and it's not, you know what you're getting. So when Oyster River comes and they want to rent time, when the UNH women's hockey team wants to rent time in York, there's a set schedule and people know what they're getting into. And I just think that's the fair way to go.
I think there's a integrity issue too, which is why I've asked for a look back over the last year, accepting that we didn't follow through with the final approval of the schedule, so I understand that. And I think the district's integrity is critically important, and so I support honoring, commitments that we've made despite, mistakes we may have made internally. But when we identify inequity, we need to make an honest effort to resolve it. And so if we made major changes to the policy last year. If we identify major inequities in how we handled fees and that sort of thing over the past year, then I'd like us to make an honest effort at remedying that. Brian, I do take your point on the sort of market forces, right? Which is why I think it's appropriate to leave the fee schedule as is for any for-profit entity. And then also, we spent a lot of time formulating the R document with mechanisms that do give the district the ability to differentiate between an organization that's truly local and supporting our community and one that might be much more broadly supporting multiple communities, right? So I think we do have the mechanisms in place to mitigate what you describe. And the other thing is, with the policing, I think we do that already. That's done in scheduling. You come up with a system where we have a very extensive agreement that organizations are expected to sign, and that lays out the parameters for use. And so, when you agree to accept you've booked something for 2 hours on a particular day, you understand that that's your time, right? And I don't have any suspicion that people aren't going to honor that. I think that's pretty well understood. So I really believe we have the mechanisms in place already to, keep this running the way we'd like it to.
So, this is a continuation of a discussion that's, probably a year and a half old now. And each time we have it, we refine and refine and refine. And I think that, Dan's concern was that it appeared that I was assuming authority I didn't have in the policy, and I want to make sure I have the authority, first of all, because I never want to be not compliant with policy. That's my job. And then the second issue is the issue of equity that Al brought up in terms of the fee structure. I 100% agree with Brian when you're talking about market forces. The for-profit section of that should be what the market is charging.
Yeah.
And Dan is absolutely right. The policy already allows me to differentiate between a local youth organization that's nonprofit supporting our kids versus a group of adults who want to come in from the 4 communities around us and use it. It's an easy decision. The kids win. I think, the issue that brought us to this tonight was a clarity in providing me some discretion in reporting, and also the issue of equity as has been discussed tonight. So I think that based on this discussion tonight, we should send this back to policy and allow the policy committee to attack it based on the concepts we've discussed tonight.
And, as with any policy or different initiative that we approve, for me, just speaking for myself, I always want that to be informed heavily by the administration's unique knowledge of what it actually takes to get it done, what are the actual costs. We are not that source of information, right? So we rely on the administration to give us that. So I want, whatever we end up approving, I want it to be informed by that source of information.
So if I could just, not to belabor that, because, the one issue that we talk about all the time is we know that in 10 years we're going to have to deal with that field, because that's the life cycle of the field. But when you talk about the cost of usage, we've, to my knowledge, never, for example, passed on the maintenance of the gymnasium to any group, whether it's an adult group, a nonprofit group, or a profit group. It's what the cost is in the fee structure. Are you suggesting that we would cost out what it costs us to maintain a gymnasium for each school, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, in keeping with...
Because that's about 90% us using those facilities.
So I guess the question to answer would be, are there additional costs incurred by the district that would not otherwise be incurred, right?
So in the case of the gymnasiums, it's a nominal cost because we're the heavy users, PE and basketball and volleyball and so forth. So I just didn't want to go down a rabbit hole of chasing out what costs across the district, when in reality there are very few facilities that are used heavily by others other than us. Is that fair?
So we've been
Am I
talking
capturing that? I'm trying to make sure I'm doing what you're...
So you're talking about capital cost.
Yeah.
What about like cleaning and maintenance?
We always charge, if there's a cleaning cost, we always charge cleaning costs, even to nonprofits. If there's a cleaning cost, we charge
within this or on top of the...
On top of that.
On top.
We capture cleaning costs pretty uniform. I mean, perhaps we didn't once in a while, but it wasn't through intent. Jim Brzezicki is very careful about, if, like, for example, somebody comes in on Sunday, we don't have a custodian on Sunday, they're paying for the custodian to come in. If Alex is needed for technology, they're paying Alex. If they haven't hired on the side for technology, if they are using our people, they're charged.
So if we have the capability to do that, it seems like we have the capability to manage the schedule on a fairly granular basis, to schedule and billing if that's the issue.
No, that's not the issue. Yeah, that would...
No, I don't think you said that, but
I guess the issue that I was hearing is, does the policy allow this blanket rate to be given to certain organizations, or should the rate be a multiple of the per unit cost? And that
Usage.
The usage, yeah. So, and I think the equity thing is that's the equity issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know that we've resolved, and I don't think we should probably resolve that tonight, but that's kind of because I mean, if you say we should have a blanket rate, that gives the authority to the athletic director, the superintendent to set that rate. The other option would be not to say it's much more fixed, because it's a multiple of whatever a single use is multiplied by how many times you use it. Is that what you could?
Yeah, that's what I'm understanding.
I mean, that seems to be the question we're kind of doing. And so, and I think probably rather than resolve it tonight, this is going to be, we have to, kind of take another whack at it. But it seems to me that's kind of an issue that we have to.
I certainly am. I'm uncomfortable with the blanket rate, I got to be honest. And I'm really uncomfortable with the idea that we'll just do it and then next year we'll see what happens. I agree with Kenny. When you do policy, you should put in policy anticipating what's going to happen. And I think the equity issue to me is a clear one. and it's a theme we've had throughout the district. So I think it's a great idea to go back to policy and hammer it out and come up with a solution, and then come back to us.
Denise?
The only thing is I, on the policy committee, have no idea how much any of this stuff costs. So it's not like we can set and say, yeah, the gym is 107.
Well, I think-
Well, that's under the other guy.
We
Dan
can't
alluded
do
to, that's
that.
our job.
That's
Our
our
job
Right.
to tell you.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure, the only thing that, I mean, from policy point of view, it already says that the superintendent is able to make grant waivers. So that's already in there. That is in there.
But I didn't grant a waiver. I mean, technically, I charged them something different than what was on the chart, and I think that's the piece. So a waiver would be, and this has happened, most recently, we had a group that was practicing in our auditorium, and they were going to be doing a performance in Portsmouth. And in the past, our music program was attached to that orchestra. This year, Sue and I discovered the Friday before they were going to come that our music program wasn't attached to this organization, at which point Sue said, what do I do? Because we hadn't charged them the previous couple of years. And I said, Sue, we just have to do a waiver right now because they're not positioned to pay us to use the auditorium 3 days before they're scheduled to come in, because they had already told Sue, we have no resources. This is just, this is an organization that puts on this performance in Portsmouth, and it's always been connected to the music program. I waived the fee. That's within the policy. But if I had charged them something different than in the structure, that's really where Dan is coming from. If I'm going to charge somebody different, then I should announce what that difference is to the board during my superintendent's report. I totally agree with that. But a waiver is already there. I can give waivers.
From a management perspective, how is the scheduling and billing handled right now? Which groups within the district are responsible for different spaces? Is it all one? Is it all facilities? Is it all athletics?
It all goes through facilities, and then it's in this particular building, you authorized Andy to have a secretary, and so Andy's secretary manages internal use, because what was happening is external use was bumping out internal use, and it was becoming a real nightmare for educators to use the auditorium. And so that secretary interfaces with Jim's secretary. And Jim's secretary is, all of the applications for use go to her. Now we have a new person this year. And so these structures that we're building are all new structures. For example, if you ask me how much any given organization paid last year, it would be pretty inconclusive numbers, because getting my hands on that is kind of tough. But going forward, it's not going to be, because, Jim and I have already sat, and Jim and I, Sue and Todd have already sat, and we already have cleaned up the vendor list, which was in your packet, and now going forward, we'll be able to marry those, the numbers to those organizations. But it's been pretty lax in the past, not because anybody was intentionally being lax, but there's a lot of demand on these buildings, and so we're trying to figure that out.
Jim, did you want to say something?
I did, just to clarify that for a second. Our scheduling program, our new system, marries the rate sheet. So all of our outside groups, inside groups, whoever puts in a request through that system, it automatically generates the rate according to the guidelines.
So we've been trying to improve our systems since this conversation has been going on, because our systems were pretty, kind of mom and pop for this.
Is that this MLS sheet?
That's correct. Yep.
So just to clarify and sort of wrap up our discussion, I think what we're asking the administration, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the board would like the administration to really look at that nonprofit serving the community column, right? Because we have the mechanisms to determine who that is. It's not broadly applicable. It's a limited number of organizations. And identify the lowest cost per use or per some rate that sort of lets the district break even on any maintenance, anticipated replacement costs, and makes the resource available to the community, in the least impactful way. Now, I will go back to, we did pass a policy last year, and, it's not the end of the world that we didn't exactly follow it, but I really strongly believe that we need to make amends if we determine that organizations were billed at different rates. So whether that's regenerating invoices or, looking at something else, and I understand that it's not easy. But if there's some large discrepancy in what organization A paid versus organization B versus organization C, then we need to understand what that is. And if it's inconsistent with what we've talked about, we need to make amends on that. I really strongly believe that. So
Make amends like refunds, or what do you mean?
maybe,
But that's a question we haven't investigated yet, but we will.
Okay. And that goes back to the integrity piece. I mean, I think, one of the themes that we've talked about publicly around this policy and the related R documents is, we want something equitable, we want something fair. And so I think we need to address any areas where we fell short on that.
I would largely say that, if there has been, it's an exception, not the rule, because largely we've followed the policy as it's written. So, we can investigate that and report back to you.
Okay.
But I don't have a sense that there's large variations in how people would treat it.
So we're going to have to wrap up, so I just want to get a sense of what the direction going
Well,
forward.
can I just ask one question? Because I'm just realizing that we have papers in our packet tonight that were not in our backup that I can see.
Yeah.
So, and I don't understand, and honestly, and I know it's late, so maybe we'll need to continue the discussion because I don't know what these, like, some of this stuff even means, but.
So why don't we just bring it into policy and come back and report?
Okay.
And so that basically that was just information of who the vendors are and how many hours we perceived the facilities being used. And, Jim created this nice little dashboard. He actually presented about 15 different dashboards, and I said, no, we'll just use a couple of them. So it was basically to try to give you a sense of who was using it and how many hours.
So does this give enough direction to policy as to what the next step in policy would be, do you feel? I mean, it seems to
I feel like I have a pretty good handle. The board wants an equitable solution, and what I want out of it is to make sure that the authority of the superintendent is expressly granted in the policy. So I'm never in a situation where the school board is saying to me, where does that say that in policy that you can do that? Because that's my lifeblood. I live by policy, and I don't want to ever be in a situation where the board says, where'd you get that authority?
So would the policy also have to state that whether you're able to offer blanket, almost discounted rates for frequent users?
I think that based on what I'm hearing tonight, the board isn't keen on blanket rates, so we'll take that blanket rate that we've offered, maximum velocity and ORYA, and turn it into an hourly rate, and just make sure that it's fair to both groups. I mean, that's ultimately what I'm hearing Dan say over and over again, is let's be fair. And I hate this word, but I'll say it, let's be transparent. Okay. And really, that's the heart of the conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
Am I right, Dan?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's enough of a direction to the policy.
It's enough for me, and we'll work through it.
Okay. Okay, I think we're going to take a break for 5 minutes. All right?
All right.
very good start. So that's a good.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, where are we? This other way.
Okay, moving down to board actions. We've approved the budget goal. A motion to approve Mr. River Middle School maternity leave. Could I have a motion to approve that?
I'll make a motion. Go ahead.
Denise?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make the request, that's fine. I mean, make the motion, sorry.
Did you make it?
It's getting late.
She feels so compelled.
Okay, moved by Denise to approve the Oyster River Middle School maternity leave. Second. Brian, discussion? None? All in favor? That maternity leave is approved. Oyster River, motion to approve the Oyster River High School request for a 2-year leave of absence for Brian Zottley.
Yeah, and so this is a little unusual. We've not had one of these requests in the district before, but it's not necessarily uncommon across the country. So what Brian is asking is for the opportunity to work in a third world country. In order to put in an application, he needs to know that the board supports a leave of absence. A leave of absence simply means that he would not be receiving any salary or benefits during the time that he's requested, which is 2 years. But the leave of absence means when he comes back, his job is here for him. And so I support it. I know Suzanne supports it, and I hope the board supports it. So that's his request.
So, I'm sorry, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the leave of absence request for 2 years for the 2021 academic year and the 21-22 academic year.
Moved by Al, second by Kenny. Discussion?
Just a question. In terms of replacing him for that period, it's a fairly unusual situation. How would we compel someone to take a 2-year position? How would we? Yeah, would we, like, I mean, typically people want a full-time position.
Oh, no, I see what you're saying. You're on the other side of the equation. Would we attract candidates to the high school for a 2-year period?
Or would there be some sort of strategy internally that we wouldn't need to advertise a position? I don't know. I'm just asking how we would
No, we would advertise the position. So technically in New Hampshire, every position that starts with us, if they're a brand new teacher, they stay on 1-year contracts for 5 years. If we bring somebody in from another district, it's 3 1-year contracts, and then they go on to continuing contract. So we should be okay in attracting candidates for this position, and we would let them know up front that it's to replace a leave of absence, so they know it's a 2-year window. So what typically has happened when people take long-term leaves is by the time the person's coming back, another position in the district's opened. And if that works out for that person, that's great. But if it doesn't, they know it's a terminal position in terms of they're replacing somebody who's going. In this particular content area, we shouldn't have great difficulty getting quality candidates. If we were talking about, physics, that's hard to do. Social studies, I don't want to say anything, I don't want this to come across as demeaning at all. We have great social studies staff, and Brian is excellent. But we've been fortunate in this district to be able to attract high-quality candidates, and I expect we will.
We have at least a couple at the high school right now, I think, in student services and in the counseling office that are duration positions based on other views.
Okay, other questions? Ready to vote? All in favor? 7 in favor. That leave of absence is approved. Motion to nominate a district-wide flex nurse.
So this was the discussion from our previous board meeting where Catherine Plord, myself, and Suzanne advocated for a 5th nurse in the district. My memo indicated that I felt it was an urgent need, And the result, really as a result of a tight job market and our inability to find short-term substitutes of any quality to come into the district. At that point, the board asked me to authorize me to go forward, and then the candidate that I would be nominating to you is Lucy Garfield tonight. She was interviewed by Catherine and myself and the middle school and high school nurses. And Lucy comes with an interesting background, very diverse background. She started out as a psychology major, so she has a psychology degree. Then she decided she wanted to be a nurse and got an associate's degree in nursing, and then finally took her nursing degree to a bachelor's level. She's been a community nurse and self-directed for the last couple of years, and everybody in the interview committee thought that Lucy would be an incredible candidate for the district, so I'm pleased to nominate Lucy Garfield to you as the flex nurse for the district.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve this nomination? Denise?
I'll motion to approve Lucy Garfield as the floater nurse, or flex nurse, I should say.
Moved by Denise, second. Brian? Discussion? Kenny?
I'm going to abstain from voting on this. There are a few things that I'm a little concerned about. When we're talking about a school nurse, and we're talking about the school nurse is often going to be in a school by herself. Part of the reason we're doing the hiring is to be able to shift that around. I would have liked to have seen her interviewed by all of the nurses, because I think it's a real team that the nurses have to work together, especially if they're really covering each other. I'm concerned about lack of experience in the school setting. Just from talking with my wife, when a nurse gets to the school, they're really there on their own, and it's not like there's really a mentor there with them and showing them the ropes. They kind of show up on day one and they're there. And I think having, other experience is great. I think not having hospital experience, because some things come down that are emergent, and you have that hospital experience to see. And then certainly the school setting is incredibly unique. And then 2 people were interviewed, and the search, we 2 weeks ago approved looking for the position. So, there are a lot of things here that just make me uncomfortable, and nothing against Ms. Garfield and nothing against the search process that went on, but I just don't feel comfortable voting for this position with my concerns.
Okay. Thank you, Kelly. Other comments?
Can you remind us the licensing situation with the state regulations that have changed in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Is this a provisional licensing situation?
Not in terms of her nursing degree, but the Department of Education got involved in nursing certificates about 5 years ago, and literally they've gone back and forth from having conditions to be a school nurse that basically would not allow any nurses in the state to become school nurses. The conditions were just onerous, to changing the law actually in this last legislative session. I just got a report on it today, where they loosened those regulations because they recognized that the job market is tight, and for nurses it's even tighter. The basic requirement is that she have a bachelor's degree. So they changed that as recently as this session. Prior to this session, it was an associate's degree, and then they upped it to a bachelor's degree. They kept that piece, but what they added to this session was that if somebody didn't have a bachelor's degree, they'd have 6 years to get it. And so the state, Michael, has been all over the map in relation to the criteria for school nurse. I think the one piece that Lucy will need to document is her experience with children over the time that she works with us, so that piece will have to be documented. I do appreciate always where Kenny's coming from. I think that in this situation, we have 4 school nurses who she'll be assisting and working with, and the only time that she would be alone is if a nurse is out. So we're hoping, of course, that our nurses are present and accounted for, and that she would be supporting the nurses in their current roles and not always just filling in for them.
Other questions? Ready to vote? All those in favor, raise your hand. 6 in favor. All those opposed? Abstaining?
No, abstain.
No abstaining.
Yep. And just one other thing on nurses. My head is still spinning from the incredible number of nurse visits in the high school. It's just extraordinary to me. And I've just been trying to come to terms with it. Like, what's driving that? Where is it? And how many of those are just standard medication? How many are something going on medically, meaning medically, you know, like I have a bad cold or I'm getting pneumonia, or how many are more kind of emotional kind of visits? And I don't mean that in a degrading way.
No, I know what you mean.
But more that something's going on, you know, with someone's emotional well-being. And I think it could be very helpful to dive into those numbers, because that usage is just crazy high. And I think it's pointing that something's going on. And I think it might help us to understand.
How about if we have the high school nurse come to the board meeting and do a report on what she's seeing, Ken, because it is an extraordinary number. Absolutely.
And we talked with the nurses just this week. I had a department meeting with them about at some point coming to a board meeting to talk about how school nursing has changed. Just as you know, education has evolved, so has school nursing, and we definitely could look closely at visits. The middle school has a significant amount of visits as well. I think that students come in, they feel comfortable, they have a good rapport, and they go in to see their nurse. You know, they're full-time, they're in the building, they're very visible, they're part of the educational team, and times have really changed, and we've talked about doing some sort of presentation for you all about their roles in the school so you can kind of see what they're doing. And I'm looking at those visits, and some of those visits, Kenny, those are not the standard. There's a separate kind of portal where we log the regulars, the kids that we know we're going to see every day for medication or a check-in, and then the other ones are just sheer visits. So we have a way to tell the difference between those.
So it makes the number even more extraordinary.
It is more, yeah, it is.
Right.
It is real, and I would say, you know, having being able to spend time in all those nurses' office, it's incredible, the changes, but I would say that I would never want to change what's been happening for students and the access to the nurse's office, because we are catching kids for lots of different reasons in that office and being able to support them differently.
The relationship between the high school nurse and the high school counseling office has proved to be incredibly beneficial for the kids who are struggling with mental health issues. You know, they go to the school nurse largely because that's where they feel the safest. And then because we added the extra counselor this year, we created a day on every single counselor's week where they are not scheduled to see their prescribed students. They're available for kids who are in crisis, and they're rotating that through. And it has been a huge help, Kenny, to have that extra person, and then have a day where every counselor is there just for emergency situations. So that's been a big help. But we can do that. We can do a nurse report to the board.
And as you said to me last night, the new hire, now a new hire who has some background
In psychology.
in psychology.
Incredible background with case managing and homeless centers and shelters and community health. It's going to really add a great amount of knowledge to our team in finding resources for families.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we move on?
Thank you.
Motion to approve Catherine Fleur as Affirmative Action Officer. Could I have that motion, Denise?
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Denise, is there a second? Brian? Discussion? All in favor? 7 in favor.
That's a thank you, Catherine.
Yep.
You loved this role, so I just thought you wanted.
Yeah. Okay, motion to approve list of policies for second read. Denise, you want to take that?
Sure, a motion to approve for second read, policy AEB, drug-free workplace, drug-free schools, and policy BDD, board superintendent relationship.
So, do you want to move those as a pair?
Unless there's any objection, I'll move them together.
We moved, those two policies are moved for approval on second read. Is there a second for that? Brian? Discussion?
There were a couple things that I had brought up last week about ADB that regarding cross-references to other discipline policies, and a suggestion that in section D, the superintendent report on the effectiveness of the policy that is alluded to there, that report come to the board every year, and those aren't in there, so I'm going to vote against this.
Because those aren't there?
They're not there. I mean, there was no action. I thought we were going to add them in there, and they're not there, so.
My apologies on that.
Why don't we just pull it and then put it there? I mean,
okay.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
I know.
Yep.
Is that agreeable to people? I mean, because I think the intent was to put them there.
Okay.
Is that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there's no reason to then, so let's withdraw that.
I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, and then we'll just vote on the BDD, right?
Yes, so I'll make a motion to approve policy BDD for second read and adoption.
Okay.
Sorry, which policy? BDD, oh, yes.
BDD, board superintendent relationship.
Okay. Can I have a second on that? Brian? We vote on that one? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. 7 in favor, that's approved. School committee updates, the manifest committee worked diligently. What?
Did I miss something? Oh,
the resignation.
yeah, just to accept the resignation.
Oh, really?
Of a staff member.
Yeah.
Is that on here?
Yes.
It's in our.
It's in our,
In our.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not reading them.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and,
Okay, yeah.
I'll make the motion to, very sadly, accept the resignation of Becky Bailey Bradley, first grade teacher at Moheramet.
Okay. Moved by Denise, or second? By Al?
And then can I just make
Sure.
a comment? Yeah, real sorry to see her go, but, yeah. I think her husband has been accepted a job elsewhere, so.
I think she's a 19-year veteran in the
Yeah.
district, so she's,
Yep.
that's
done a
definitely
great
somebody who's
job.
done a great job
Okay.
for us.
Wish her the best. Okay. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the resignation, please raise your hand. 7 in favor. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. And then we have the school committee updates. The manifest committee met, reviewed the manifest. Are there other committee updates?
I alluded to it last night, Wellness met. I'm scheduled the 15th to meet with Jesse again, which is the sleep study. We're just kind of going over the data and getting ready for a presentation to do in November, just so that it's a well put together presentation. The committee, again, is breaking up into smaller subdivisions. There was one that's doing policy. I'm back on the one where we're looking at employee wellness. How can we get higher participation in the health screenings and smart shopper programs, hopefully control our costs and improve the health of our employees. And then there's a new one that's coming forward, really, which is kind of interesting. Doris was talking about it, which is like trying to put together information for people who are going to have events that they really do comply with the wellness program, because those tend to be the violations. And I thought Doris brought up a really interesting point, which is that it turns out like, and this is like because we're an affluent district, that you tend to forget that there are kids that are on free and reduced lunch. And so when a field trip happens or there's some activity, they'll just say, oh, just bring money and you can get food along the way, and those kids can't. And so there can be a stigma against them getting a bag lunch or getting a meal that they really need. And so this committee is really going to kind of look at how do we address that. Or that subcommittee is going to look at how to address that.
Other committee updates? Okay. Public comment?
I'm Dean Rubin. I thought I'd make a comment on the nurse's office, because my daughter had scoliosis surgery and started school, I think, about 3 weeks after it, and still had a kind of a healing incision, and was in a lot of pain and had all sorts of doctor's notes that said she could have relief and do half days and take rest at the nurse's office, and she really took advantage of that and spent a lot of time. The nurse changed her bandage several times and had painkillers for her, and actually met with us and the principal to prepare for Hannah's return, and it was really great, and she's doing great, and I really appreciate all the help that the nurse's office gave us.
Thanks, Steve.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bevy Cadle from Madbury. I want to, I appreciated the great discussion you brought up, Dan, about the rate sheet. Triggered some memories. I'd like to offer that we forgot an important player on this team. We talked about the not-for-profits, but we didn't talk about the parents. There's parents like me. I get nervous when I get in front of you guys, but I'll get over it. Anyhow, there's parents like me that may have a kid who is not reading at grade level, is suffering academically. So that was me last year, probably still is me now. So parents have to pay for a room charge. Maybe you could go to a library and get some space there, but that's another transition for the kid. And there's not a lot of space in our libraries for this kind of thing. The equality game isn't fair because not-for-profits get out of the real estate tax to a great degree. Us parents don't. We pay the taxes, we pay the room charge, we pay the tutorer. There's no subletting involved. And I'm still nervous, but whatever. So anyhow, when you guys go back to think about this, maybe we could add the parents that are, bona fide, trying to get a kid not to stay back or to get them off an IEP, and we're paying that extra cost. Let's consider us into the equality game. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So this is kind of, Catherine Flora, Durham, this is kind of different. I've never done this right away, but I want to just chime in about the rate setting regarding the facilities use, because I am a user of many of the vendors that then pay to use our facilities, and it got me a little concerned if we're going to go to an hourly rate as a parent, because if you start putting in significant rates, it's going to have me paying much more for my children to participate in athletics or clubs that are offered by ORYA and MV. I think there's also a difference between what we as a community are already investing into our community. So an organization like ORYA is serving our 3 communities. We are paying taxes already to the community, and then we're paying fees to play. There are some organizations that use our facilities that are cut teams, so it's not open to all. Participation is based on whether you could make a team or not. So I just want to and that may work for families as well, but I just want to make sure that the fees don't get to a rate where then my fees are going to double on top of taxes and things we're already paying to be using the facilities we already are paying for. Right. Yeah, thanks.
Closing actions, we have the list of the meetings coming up. We do not have a non-public or a non-meeting, so we're ready to motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Al, second by Brian. All in favor? We're adjourned.